there's a somatic embodied this wisdom that you have because you yourself has gone through it, right? And you can consume knowledge, but you can't consume wisdom. You can't take someone else's wisdom and make it your own.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. And today we have a very special guest for you. Before we get into that, real quick, we don't do any external advertisements, but I would like to ask if you are a repeat listener, it would help us out a lot if you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast, share it if you get value out of it. We're trying to grow the podcast and help as many people as possible. The mission of Peak Performance is to inspire people to prioritize and transform their health. So we greatly appreciate any help you can give us there. Now, today, our special guest is actually my own coach. He is a coach to many millionaires and even billionaires. And he's an executive coach, I guess, performance coach, life coach, whatever you want to call him. But he is a great blend. And why I wanted to bring him on here is because at Peak Performance, health is more than just, what you put in your body. There's a lot here to do with mental health. And we haven't had too many podcast episodes about that. And so figured I'd bring on the guy that helps me with my mental health. So John O'Connor, thank you so much for joining us here today, and pleasure to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Tulor. Thank you.
Awesome, John. Well, I guess let's start with a kind of like a brief intro of I know you've done a lot of work, and this is why you're such a great coach, done a lot of work spiritually, personal development. You're knowledgeable about business things as well, although, you're not really, when you're coaching millionaires and billionaires who have big businesses, you're probably not trying to tell them how to do their business. It's probably more around the mental aspect, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, most of my clients are way smarter than I am, for sure.
Yeah. You're pretty smart yourself. Give yourself a little credit. But so yeah, let's maybe tell people just a little bit about kind of like what you do, maybe a little bit about how you got to where you are, the kind of the short version, but like what you do and yeah, kind of people you work with and what you do in that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I'm in the process of writing a book to help distill down, the essence of my work, because it's evolved over time. It's like what I started out doing isn't what I'm doing today, and it's evolved. So essentially, I help people access and activate, fill in the blank, right? Whether that's potential, inner wisdom, resources, skills and abilities, and so. I got my start, the journey's long. I'm at level 40 now in my life, right? I don't really talk about age. It's like a video games. It's level 40. I'm going to be
right.
50 in a couple of years. But, my work, its roots, I mean, obviously, if we think about how our childhood informs the things that we do, I mean, definitely for me, early trauma in, when I was 8 or 9 years old, really brought me on this journey where like my whole entire system got locked up and shut down and frozen, and did a really good job navigating that, because as humans we're very adaptable creatures, right? We find ways to adapt, and so and I did, and in my late teens I started having these kind of spiritual awakenings and starting to realize just how locked up and frozen I was on the inside. And began a journey of trying to explore my own inner state and like what was going on. And I remember early on, and this is like a little plug with some caveats in there, but in my late teens, smoking pot when I first, like in 17, 18, really kind of broke me out of the fog of the trauma that I was in. And psychedelics earlier in my teens, absolutely, definitely plugged me into a whole other space of reality. I'm sober 22 years now. So, that kind of path went down a dysfunctional road. But I started early on feeling really locked up internally. And my sister and I, was real quick, I mean, there's been a podcast where I've talked about this, but we're both hit by a car when we were kids. She was 4, I was 8. And she lost her leg from the hip down, but I got thrown clear. And so in that experience of like that, everything is fine, walking life as a kid. And then next thing you know, you're on the floor, waking up, and there's this very traumatic, violent thing that occurred, and it colored and informed my early childhood greatly. It was like the biggest impact for me psychologically as a kid. And so that sort of PTSD kind of spiraling out in my teens, I started to really explore. I was fascinated with the body as a result of that, having grown up with my sister going in and out of PT and learning how to walk again and wearing prosthetic legs and all that. I just got exposed to tons of that. And in my teens, like that, there's a lot of research now talks about like early childhood trauma and the impact on executive functioning. And, taking a look at some of my learning disabilities as a kid, having really difficulty in school. I became really adept with my hands. And so I actually wound up going to massage therapy school when I was 21, and it was a long road getting there. I was not going to go through the whole journey, but I went through 5 colleges. It was a very long journey, but I wound up in massage therapy school, and I was a massage therapist. I trained, in Swedish and shiatsu. So, Chinese 5-element theory. Shiatsu was basically like acupressure, but really working through the Chinese methodology around health. And for 17 years, I don't know, 15, 16,000 bodies I worked, and parallel, as an actor as well. My father was in television. He worked for a soap opera. He was a videotape editor. And I got exposed when I was 18 to working on set with all these actors who seemed so free. They were expressive. They were in their bodies. They were relaxed and open. And I looked at that and I wanted that. I wanted to feel as loose and expressive and free as they were. And I wasn't, right? And so I went down the acting path really as an exploration of trying to break free within myself. So massage and acting were my early influences. Acting gave me permission to experience the range of emotion dropping into my body, and massage, I was working on bodies, and so through my acting work, I was in a program with William Esper, which is a Meisner program. And the whole beginning year was all about how do you feel about everything. And I remember that process of going in, trying to like feel how I felt. And it just felt like spaghetti. It felt like I had this mishmash of feelings swirling, sadness, anger, big paintbrush rollers. There was really no fine tipped brush of emotion. It was just raw. Right? Whether it was disgust or anger or peak joy or sadness. I mean, it was very broad strokes of emotion. And through that process of dropping in and constantly having to feel into how do I feel, that actually opened up a pathway to a therapist through a friend of mine who actually was a drug and alcohol counselor. I didn't know at the time. And we started to explore my relationship with substances and drinking. And I didn't think I had a problem at the time. And so he's like, great, if you don't have a problem, let's just stop for 90 days and let's see what's under the hood. Like if you stopped all this stuff that you're doing, like what's underneath that? And when I started to try to do that, I couldn't do it. I'd go a week, I'd go 2 weeks, and I found myself really dysregulated when I stopped substances. And that led me to eventually getting sober around 25. So a lot of my work today is informed and rooted in, my journey to freeing myself, feeling comfortable in my skin, which at the time as an actor, I was squirmy in my skin. I felt very uncomfortable in my skin. It's informed by my body work, 17,000 hours of working with bodies. And one of the things that really started to move me more in the direction of the work that I do today, executive coaching is kind of like it's a word that captures an essence of what I do, but it's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
But I started to realize like I'd work on bodies, and the body would, people would show up with all these quote unquote symptoms, right? Whether it was fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, TMJ, anxiety, intestinal issues, IBS, all these different things in the body. And what was so interesting was I started to see, I'd work with people, and I have this term that I use called unique medicinal frequency, where I feel like each of us, you and me, we all carry a unique frequency. Everybody has their own. And to me, one of the things, going back to my book, Essential Skills, is what is yours? Like discovering that and then building a business or a life around that unique frequency you carry. And for me, my frequency was when people came to me, they got out of the heads, they got in their bodies, and they activated. For some reason, like when I put my hands on them, it slowed them down, it dropped them in, and all of a sudden they were able to start having those ahas, like, oh, yeah, that's what's going on. And the clarity started to emerge when I would touch people. There was just something that it was almost like they were coming back home into their bodies fully. And then they go out in the world and they come back and they were in the same spot they were when they first came in. And it was over and over again where I just find these patterns reemerging. And so I started to realize there are things happening upstream, right? If you step in a stream and it's black, like where's the black coming from? You kind of look upstream, like where's that source where it's polluting the quote unquote body. And I started to realize like upstream, you have thoughts, feelings, emotions, trauma. You have someone who has a calling that wants to emerge and they're refusing the call. And in that refusal of the call of the thing that most deeply wants to emerge in their life, this tension begins to form. This uneasiness begins to settle into the body. And over time, that uneasiness and tension begins to formulate into, and then you name whatever the symptom or problem or issue or pathology that people are coming in with. And I would say the majority of it has some roots upstream, whether that's childhood, unexpressed emotion. I mean, I've done work where we found parts that didn't have a mouth, right? It was pre-verbal. So you've got these parts that have all this stuff, this sensation, this feeling, this swirl, but it doesn't speak. It doesn't have a voice. It can't express itself. So it never gets discharged. So people carry such heavy loads of emotional turmoil or struggle or inner reactivity or inner conflict. So I started to watch as we begin to, and I didn't really have the skills at the time when I was working on the bodies. And I kind of wish I did have the skills that I have today when I was doing all that body work. A lot of the stuff that I was doing was very intuitive, and, breakthroughs would happen, but yeah, I didn't, it wasn't like, okay, great. Like, here's the toolkit. Here's what we're going to do. And this is what we're going to work. It was just stuff would just happen. I've had Michael Stipe from REM write albums on my table. I've had, I've worked to everybody from the Sex and the City girls to Patti Smith, to the Rockettes, to Willem Dafoe, to just to name a few. And it's like sort of like name dropping here for a second, but it was really I got to say, it was really wonderful. Even like Patti Smith was my original company was named after, she actually named my company, but putting my hands on people like that, right, who have this deep connection on a creative level was so beautiful. And I really feel like I got informed energetically by working on a lot of those people. And so
it's really interesting what you just said. And first of all, I love that I got to hear, the story of kind of your origin story, because I personally haven't heard that before. So that was amazing. I also love what you said about, I maybe want to dig a little deeper into this if we can. What you said about like, kind of like almost, let's not say all, but let's just say majority of physical pain in the body, comes from some sort of, whether it be traumatic event, mental stress. You and I talked on our last call about, rather than me being concerned about leaving a legacy, focus more on living a legacy, right? Yeah. And things of that nature. But I would agree, it's like, so even if some physical ailment is caused by you having bad health, it's like, okay, so why is someone so overweight? Why is someone overeating, right? They have an addiction to eating or sugar or something, right? All of that stems from some sort of mental or emotional or some sort of, there's something under there. And I think that's something that I would say you do a great job of, with your clients, uncovering, kind of fast forwarding to what you're doing more of today, mentally uncovering that, going into that, releasing that somehow, things of that nature, I think are really, really impactful.
Yeah, on that point. So, one of my, early trainings, I went down the path of, learning neurolinguistic programming, Ericksonian hypnosis. I became an NLP trainer.
Nice.
And one of the core presuppositions of NLP, right, is that, is this idea around everybody has their own maps of reality. And the definition of fundamentalism is that my map is the map. And if you don't believe my map, you're going to hell, right? It's kind of like fundamentalist, religion. If you don't believe this bad thing will happen to you. So there's this projection. And there's a lot of projecting of maps of like what should be true. And so as a coach, as a transformational guide, so to speak, the way that I look at it is like what I'm sharing is not the truth. I've established a generative frame of beliefs that allow my life. Because here's the thing, like at the end of the day, why do any of this work, right? Like, what are we actually trying to do, And so there's a couple of core for me personally, and you and I talk about this, is like, what am I really trying to do? And so on one level, what I'm really trying to do is if from the egg and the sperm meeting and you get the little zygote, right? And the cell splitting and multiplying and dividing, the essence, our code is about expansion and evolution. It's written into our DNA. It's about a flowing river. So you and I, as living beings, our natural state is fluidity and flowing. There is no stuck or static. That's just a concept. We are constantly in movement. There's there's three, I don't know how many the numbers are, trillions of cells born and die every second, right? Whatever those, right? Even when nothing's happening, there's billions of neurons firing, right? There's skin cell. We can go through the whole list of digestion and hormones, and there's always things happening in the space, in our system. And so our essence is movement, fluidity, evolution, and growth. And if you're not growing, that's not natural. Like, growth is natural. If you're not growing and you're quote unquote stuck, there's something getting in the way that once you remove it, growth is natural. So all these people who are focused on like always growing, how do I grow and how would I grow? It's not about accumulating. It's about releasing and eliminating or reframing whatever is getting in the way, right? Whether that is a belief, whether that's a part of you that has a specific intention to keep you safe, right? So there's a young part of me that, I don't know if I've told the story, but when I was in high school, we got into this really big fight, 20 people with 20 people. My car got destroyed. I got stabbed. It was a very visible, violent, experience for me when I was 17. And there was this moment where I felt like I had to go into the shadows because these people that we got into a fight with I knew them. It was very visible. And I had to kind of like go on the DL a little bit so that I didn't get killed. Right. And energetically, I pulled back. Like, I just like, okay, I'm just going to I can't be seen, because if I'm seen, I'm going to be attacked. Right. And of course it eventually blew over and everything was fine. And I cleared things with those people. But on a visceral somatic level, there was a part of me that's like, it's not safe to put my head out there. It's not safe. That young part of me had that code of like, if I put myself out there, something bad could happen. Right. And now logically, I knew that wasn't the case. Right. And it's interesting. I've been tracking this for a while, but I've built two very, very successful businesses as a massage therapist and as a coach. I don't have much of a digital presence. I don't have an Instagram following. I don't even know what's on my website. And, I have more than enough, right, in terms of success. And so, and I used to pride myself on building things in the shadows, right? Like, if you worked with me, you only worked with me because you knew me or you knew people who worked with me, and you got referred to me. That was as a massage therapist and as a coach. It's still, And it wasn't until I started doing some EMDR this past year with a friend of mine, where I recognized there was this part of me who, in order to keep me safe, kept me in the shadows. And I built it from the back. I led from behind, right? I built something successful without putting my face out there. And I didn't realize that this part's main intention was to keep me safe. And the way that it did that, every time I tried to like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I put myself out there. Like there's a part of me that's like, nope. Like no matter how much I want to do it, nope. There was just something in the shadows. And we talk a lot about this when you want to make a developmental leap, that's a quantum leap that's bigger than your current identity. When you make the leap, there are these hooks from the past that you have to clear. There's something that tugs that needs to be cleared or integrated or metabolized that hasn't yet been metabolized, right? And not everybody has hooks when they make a quantum leap. Some people quantum leap and it's like, boom, and they don't really have much tethering them to this current reality. But for me, that was a really big one. And I've been doing a lot of work around it. And I find that even now it's clear, my skill set for doing it is really underdeveloped because I haven't really paid attention to that. Right. So, yeah, I don't know how we got on that topic.
Yeah, no, that's really great stuff, man. Yeah. And a lot of similarities there myself in many ways. You know, I would rather be behind the scenes and not have anyone know who I am or anything like that, you know, like, but I started thinking about through different coaching and personal development. It's like, okay, well, how can I deliver more value? How can I, you know, help more people, deliver more value? And I obviously enjoy having these conversations, and I feel very grateful that we're able to share this, and I'm learning, I get to help other people learn, I'm adding value to people's lives. So it's like, yeah, so like, I had to get out of my comfort zone and, you know, do stuff like this podcast to deliver more value to others. But, you know, and through a lot of thinking time, and by the way, I love the word quantum leap. One of my favorite books, probably definitely the book I've read the most, more than any other book in my life, is called U Squared, YOU, and then the number 2 by Price Pritchett. And it's all about making a quantum leap. And I've been, you know, I've read it probably maybe several hundred times because it's part of my morning routine. It's a very small book. You can read the whole thing in 20 minutes. And I usually skim to my favorite parts, but, and I've used it to, you know, have this quiet time. And maybe we could talk a little bit about this, what your thoughts are about this too. People are, in my opinion, so many people are keeping themselves so busy, just waking up, immediately turning something on or looking at their phone or jumping on their email, or, you know, even they have to listen to music or they have to listen to this or the news or something. And for me, one of the biggest things to be able to work on myself. And, you know, as you know, I've gone through, you know, something personal, losing someone very close to me recently. And so it's even more like I'm literally like sitting in silence and just trying to process all this. But even before this event that happened to me previously, just going out for my morning routine and just visualizing gratitude, quiet time, thinking time. And it's almost like the more I did less busy work and more kind of processing, thinking, okay, what do I really want? Right. You know, what do I really want? What's really important to me? Like, okay, I really want to help more people. Okay, well, if you want to help more people, why aren't you, you know, doing that? And then it's like, okay, so what do I do? Right. And so all of this whole process unfolded only by me doing work with people like you, me doing quiet time and processing and thinking and spending more time not doing the opposite of busy work, you know?
Yeah. So two things here. One is, you know, that word quantum leap, right? It always goes in, and I came from a very woo-woo background. Like I was as woo-woo in my.
I didn't. I only turned woo-woo after a bunch of personal development. Yeah.
But going through a lot of, you know, development and growth, what's really beautiful is a lot of the science, the neuroscience now is validating some of the stuff that was labeled woo-woo, right? But just to define a quantum leap, right? And to me, a quantum leap is if I think about what's possible from this identity, and the identity is a really interesting thing too, right? This is the thing, I was like, who am I? Right? As a question, and people really get stuck, right? Am I this or am I that? And it's like, well, actually you're both and probably a lot more. And there are different identities that form. And how do we construct the identity that's useful in the context? And what identities are not useful in the context, right? So like as a father, my identity as a father with my son, whereas different than my identity as a husband with my wife, is different than my identity as a coach. And these different identities, they're constructed, and I've done a lot of work. I do a lot of identity work, as you know, are constructed in a way that allow myself, whatever we define the self to be, right? I know people talk about, a lot of leaders in the space, but there is no self. And yeah, sure. I mean, what's your working definition of self, right? To me, it's the space where all my resources live. It's the thing, it's my de-identified self. It's the part of me that's plugged into source, right? However, everybody has I feel like it's important to feel into, like, hey, what is the self? It's that place I touch when I unhook from all of the reactivity and the narratives and the stories. And it's a place of regenerative growth. It's a place where I nourish myself, right? There's this pure potentiality in me. And what's interesting is that deepest aspect of myself, how do I fully express it, right? What's the identity that allows me to fully express myself as a father, as a coach in the space, really helping people to access and activate potential, activate wisdom, bring that wisdom from potentiality of just they're experiencing it in their body to actually making contact with the world, right? Because it's really in contact where transformation occurs. And this is kind of what I do in my work, is how do I connect and contact with another person that allows transformation to occur, real contact, helping people to really make contact with what's happening inside themselves. And that's the thing too, like going back. So a quantum leap is like my identity, this is what's possible. And a quantum leap is a reality that is not even considered possible, where you can step into. It's an identity that you haven't even stepped into. So I am this, and then all of a sudden now I am this, I'm open and powerful and carry a wave of transformation. That's who I am. Right. And I am statements, you hear it all the time. Oh, I'm scared. I'm insecure. Oh, I'm an introvert. Oh, I'm not good enough. And people make these identities very quick. Oh, I'm an introvert. Oh, I am. That's who you are. You're an introvert. Okay, well, introverts behave this way. And so for your unconscious mind is expressing that identity, right?
Right.
So my upgraded identity is I'm an introvert with a black belt in extroversion skills.
Nice.
Right. And that identity allows me the space to recharge and replug out in nature, but also step into a room and feel totally at ease. I practice Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right? And when I roll with black belts, they're not struggling all that much against me. Like I'm a soon to be purple belt and I struggle and they don't, right? So they just fluidly pounce me, very efficiently, right?
Yeah, I like what you said real quick. I do want to touch on like the beliefs and the negative, I guess, negative affirmations when people say, I'm not good at this, or I am this or that. It's super important because actually learning NLP and learning from Tony Robbins early on, and I actually got NLP certified myself. I never trained or did anything like that afterwards, but it was very useful, especially to talk about beliefs, right? Yeah. And it's interesting because now I actually listen to that too, right? Like I'm sure you obviously can listen when someone's talking to you. You can see, oh, this is this person's belief system based on how they're talking about themselves, about the world, right? Limiting beliefs that they have about themselves, right? The identity. And so it's very interesting. And kind of going back to some really old, when I first got into personal development, I first learned about beliefs, and I kept catching myself saying these negative things about myself. I even did the old thing back in the day. I wore a rubber band, and then every time I caught myself saying something negative, I would snap myself with the rubber band and try to, and then I would turn it around and say, no, like, it's like someone who's like, I'm not good at math. It's like, you were not good in math in like third grade, and the teacher told you that. And now you're like 25 years old and you still think you're not good at math, right? Like you carried that limiting belief.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because a lot of what I do too is like when I'm working with people, it's really interesting to watch their identity, how they self-assess, right? How they see themselves, and the narratives about themselves are not congruent with their current reality, right? It's somehow tethered to an old reality or an old identity, but they're still carrying the narrative or the way in which they view themselves, right? So bringing people into the now, because really the now is the place of transformation. You can only transform in the now.
Right.
So it's always about what's happening now, right? And when you ask somebody what's happening, they go to the past. They go, oh, well, so last week, it's like, well, what's happening now? How do you feel about it today? You tell me how you felt about it last week, right? So coaching in the now is a really essential piece. But this identity, just a little piece just for the listeners, when we construct identity, we want to construct an identity in the context of an outcome, right? So identities form to achieve an outcome, right? And so what is the outcome? And so when I do my work, we look at how do we connect to an outcome that's really tethered to the deepest calling. Right. So if my identity is formed around my deepest calling, right, then we're not like an ego outcome. Like, I want to be a millionaire. It's great. Well, who are you? Like, who do you need to be a millionaire? Great. Let's form like, okay, I want to, like, an identity is, the outcome is raising a healthy, grounded, mature, self-aware child, right? Like that's an outcome as a father, right? And so what is the identity that allows that outcome to be achieved? And let's construct my identity as a father that moves that to that outcome with my son. So who am I? I'm open, I'm grounded, I'm present, I'm curious, I'm non-reactive, I'm engaging, I'm listening. That's who I am as a father. It's very simple as an identity, right? Identities construct and deconstruct all the time. Where people get stuck is they either have a disempowering identity, or they don't fluidly shift between identities. It's stuck. And you see this sometimes where people like in a work identity and they come home and they don't shift out of work identity. Or they're in bed and they don't shift out of work identity, right? Like they don't know how to fluidly shift between identities. I don't want my identity as a coach when I'm laying next to my wife in bed, right? That does not work. Right. Like working with challenging egos is not the identity that I want when I'm connecting with my wife, right? Is it very different? What's my outcome with my wife? Right. Intimacy, connection, love, support. Well, who am I? Who do I need to be to create intimacy, connection, love, openness, vulnerability? Wow. Like, I'm vulnerable. I'm intimate. Like, I am courageous, sharing that which I don't want to share. That's who I am. Like, and that identity allows me to create connection and intimacy and vulnerability. Right. So nice. And so there's a whole process called access identity that I do around constructing beliefs and values and behaviors and skills. And this is the other thing too, is my old mentor used to say when I was like, oh, I'm just not confident or something. Say, stop that. There's no such thing as confidence. There's skill and ability, right? Like Jean-Georges, when he coaches, does not have to be confident when he cooks because he's got the skill. When you have skill, you don't need confidence. You just do it, right? And so stop thinking about confidence and start building skill and capability. And when you got skill, you just do it. There's a lot of things that I have skills around. I don't even think about it. I don't need confidence. I just do it, right? It's a natural thing, right? So what I love about that is skill is anybody can build skill around anything they want, right? Like you can build skill, right? If I don't know, I'm not confident with like talking to people and asking for money, or like I'm not confident with like getting new client, whatever. It's like, no, it's a skill. I don't need confidence in that space because I have skill, right? So I'm always in the space of like, let's build skills. What are the core skills that you need to build that allow you to live extraordinary, right? And this goes back to like my book title, Essential Skills for Extraordinary Living. And what I've been loving about this book is there's something about like, I'm discovering things as I write it as well, which is beautiful. There's like the things that I know that I'm teaching. There's the things that I'm stepping into that are unfolding in the writing process, which is really beautiful. But
yeah, that's great. I love what you said there too. And it's so true. Like, even with me, like when I first started learning about health, if I would have went into a room with a bunch of health experts, I would have had zero confidence. But now after doing, tens of thousands of hours of studying health,
You have a
now I'm
a lot of
confident,
skill.
right?
Yeah. You don't need confidence going in front of a room and someone's like, hey, Tiller, can you just talk about health for a second? You don't need confidence. You just share your experience. You have skills in framing the conversation or really highlighting the problem and identifying the core things you need to do to achieve it. It's just, it's also embodied. And this is another thing too, where I notice is that Ido Portal, who's like this movement coach, who's incredible, by the way. If anybody doesn't know Ido Portal, Google him, follow him. He's just a real master. But he was the guy who I originally found out about him through Conor McGregor. He was his movement coach.
Interesting.
And I wound up doing a couple workshops with Ido Portal. And he had this thing where he talked about level 1 knowledge and level 2 knowledge. And level 1 knowledge is a conceptual understanding of something. Level 2 knowledge is the embodiment and the ability to execute that knowledge under stress, right? Repetitively with masterful, skill, right? So what I've noticed in today's world is, I've seen this a couple of times where, I'll teach something, with a group of people, and then I'll go watch Instagram, and then I'll watch those people teach what I just taught, right? As their own, right? Which is fine. People just, assimilate, and then they quote it as if it's their quote, right? But they're speaking about it from a conceptual understanding. Right? And there's a lot of level 1 experts out there who are really good at hearing something and then articulating it in such a way you're like, wow, you're smart. You know a lot of stuff, right? But if I put them under stress with a lot of variables, they're not able to execute that, right? In their own life consistently. And jujitsu is a beautiful example of this. I can learn a move and do it in drilling. And then I get into rolling and it's just, I'm gassing out, I'm under stress. I'm getting choked out. Like when you're in real life, the dynamics to apply what takes a lot of time to embody, right? So one of the core frames for me is if I learn something, that quote, I think it's from Japan, where they say like knowledge is just a rumor until it's in your muscles, is how do I take what I know, bring it into my muscles so that I can embody it? And so this goes back to you, is there's a somatic embodied this wisdom that you have because you yourself has gone through it, right? And you can consume knowledge, but you can't consume wisdom. You can't take someone else's wisdom and make it your own. You can consume their wisdom into knowledge, but then to convert knowledge into wisdom requires the breakdown, the struggle, the embodiment, the practice, the repetition, the
actual experiencing of it, right? You can listen to 1,000 hours, but again, probably my experience of going through pain and inflammation and kind of healing and recovering myself and going through the experience of it all is the more valuable part of actually getting it to the level 2 knowledge.
But there's another level to it too, is you have the experience, but you also have the education and the skill, right? It's
exactly.
Both, right? Because I know there's people out there who move into the world of coaching, and coaching I started in 2009, which nobody even knew what coaching was really. And now it's like everybody's becoming a coach, right? Which is fantastic. It's awesome. I love it. Like, I don't believe in competition. We only compete with ourselves, right? But there are people who move into the space because they've gone through a difficult time, think now that they can coach someone through that same experience or something similar. And if my heart surgeon has had 4 open heart surgeries but never have studied open heart surgery, I don't want him doing open heart surgery, right? Right. So there's a combination of skill acquisition and experience, right? And in terms of skill acquisition in the coaching space, is that people do take a 2-week course and they become a coach. It's similar to acting. And I did this when I was an actor. When someone's like, what are you doing? I'm an actor. And it's, oh, wow, you're an actor. That's so cool. What have you done? Well, I was an extra in a Jim Carrey movie, Yeah. It's like, I have no fucking experience. Like, I didn't, but I was saying I was an actor at the time. It felt great to say I'm an actor, right? So anybody could say they're a coach, right? And so, which again, it's beautiful. I mean, I think that we all start, if we look at the tarot deck, right? The first card of the tarot deck is the Fool. So whenever we go down a path, you have to pull the Fool card in order to get to mastery, in order to get to that end card, right? Like transformation of the king, whatever that is, like the highest version of expression in the world, you have to pull the Fool card. It's an essential part of any journey, right? So I'm not like, poo-pooing people who start that way. I started that way too. But it's important to know, like, when you're looking to work with people, like, who do you want to work with, right? Like, and resonating with people who have, like, not only skill but experience in an area. I mean, again, like, and that's to a certain degree, right? Like, I coach a lot of guys who run huge real estate hedge funds. I know nothing about real estate. I don't need to. They do. And so my job is helping them get out of their own way so they can access their own wisdom and execute from a place of clarity and connection and certainty, right? Because they're able to access themselves.
Yeah. That's really good. One thing before, I know we got to wrap soon, but I did want to kind of see if we could leave the listeners also with maybe like potentially an action step or some sort of practice or something. Like, so people have been listening now. They're like, okay, this sounds great. I want to experience a quantum leap. I want to change my identity. I'm ready to make a change in my life. I'm ready to get to the next level. What's one of the first things that maybe people can look at or start to do? How can they uncover maybe their limiting beliefs? How can they start to maybe identify what maybe is holding them back from achieving their ideal self or whatever it is, for themselves?
Such a great question. And Ido Portal would say, it depends.
Right. Yeah, like, of course. I know it's so dependent on the person's situation.
It's such a, but it goes back to the sort of this meta frame around, when we think about, like, what are we striving to get better skills in, right? And to me, like, the essential skill is learning how to metabolize your experience, processing better. That's essential, right? And what I notice is that where people get stuck is they don't know how to process, or they don't have the skill to process their experience. And one of the, if we think about like parasites, right? Like, I had a parasite in my intestines that was sucking all the magnesium out of my body, right? And I probably had it for many years. It was causing fatigue and all these different things, brain fog. And so I would eat great food, and I would do all these supplements, and I'd cold plunge and sauna, all these different things, right? But there was something, this little guy, or many billions of them, I don't know how many were in there, who were dampening the stuff that I was putting in my body. I wasn't able to absorb it, right? And so most people are running so fast in themselves, in their minds, or going from, achieving something right to the next climb without ever metabolizing their experience, or slowing down enough so that they can process, like, what is really happening here, right? Like, bringing it out of the conceptual realm into the body, like slowing it down, bringing in and metabolizing. So starting that journey of going, okay, like, what do I need to do? How do I start metabolizing my experience in a really functional, healthy way? How do I do that, right? And people talk about like morning rituals and journaling, and it's funny because I hate the word journaling because it has a lot of negative connotations to it. Like, oh, I journal. Like, so this morning I woke up, I had a cup of coffee, and you can do that. You can do like morning pages, brain dump, stream of consciousness, which I think is actually really helpful. And I do aspects of that myself. But every morning I get up and someone's like, how long do you journal? I'm like, well, I pour a big cup of coffee, and however long it takes me to drink it is how long I write. Like, that's my timer. It's usually my cup of coffee. I usually have two. So it's a little bit longer. But the journaling process, or I have one client call it a high performance handbook. Another one call it like, my contemplation book, right? There's something about slowing down and dropping in and really feeling into, so here's something they can do. So I have this thing called a life rhizome that I created, right? And I probably should put something together people can download, and maybe this will help me put that together. But I do this with clients where I'll take a look at the 5 core areas of your life, right? So we look at your finances, right? So money, actually, money in, money out. We look at your health and well-being, just overall wellness. So I look at that as like physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, right? We look at community, right? So community is any other person outside of you that you connect with. It could be one, two to as many as your community in life. Who is your community? Who are you connecting with? Your family, right? If you have a family and your intimate partner, and the work that you do, right? So I usually will mind map, right? Money, health, my wife, family, my business, my community. And then I go into each one. I literally drop in to a dimension of my life. You can do this too. You write on a piece of paper, you can do this every morning. Mind map it, little circles, boom, money. So I drop into money and just kind of feeling into, okay, in my dimension, in my life, where I'm at now, like I feel into my relationship with money. When I think about money, what's the emotion that comes up? Like what's here? It's like, okay, is it like, oh, wow, I just feel a sense of safety and security, right? Or is it like, I don't have enough, scarcity, scarcity, fear, anxiety, worry. Great. So we just start mapping that out. Great. Scale from 0 to 10. Where are you right now in that feeling? It's a fucking 9. I just feel like it's just holy shit. Okay, great. So now we're just starting to become aware of, okay, well, and there's a lot of processing we can do, but sometimes in a journal, I'll drop in, where am I financially? I feel inspired. I feel hopeful. I feel excited. Great. On a scale from 1 to 10, I feel like an 8. Great. I'm an 8. So what would make it a 10? Or sometimes what we'll do is we'll drop in and say, what really wants to emerge here? Wave a magic wand. Anything is possible. Like, what would I love to experience in this dimension of my life around my relationship with money? And some people are like, oh, $1 billion. And it's like, you know what? No, it's like, I just want more than, I want enough and plus, just that's all. Or, it could be anything. I just want to feel a sense of like competency. And there's an art and a skill to feeling into what is that thread? What's the thing that wants to emerge in this area for you? And sometimes we have to go through onion layers to get to the calling.
Yeah.
So I always kind of feel in what's the thing that's present. And then as you begin to unpack and unwind that, there's something underneath that, right? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the one or the calling. It's just any calling, right?
Yeah.
So the calling could be like, wow, like I just struggle all the time. Like, what do I really want? I just want to like know what the fuck I want to know what I'm doing. Great. So my calling is competency, right? So in that area, I'm feeling this emotion. What really wants to emerge is this feeling of competency. Great. And then you can start playing around with like, okay, like what would life be like if I was really competent with money? Like just imagine, wave a magic wand, anything is possible. I have a lot of skill with finances. Like what can I do now that I couldn't do then? And just starting to play with like, wow, I could be investing. I could be working with startup founders. I could be, buying homes and creating passive streams of income. Like, and just playing with possibility. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll go through that process. And I have I have so many versions and variations. There's no way to do this right or wrong. You just do it, right?
Right.
What I really want to get to is like, what is one thing, one simple action that I can take today that would move me in that direction? It doesn't have to be big, right? It's like, one action is I keep getting these emails from Garrett Gunderson, like he's got this like wealth creation factory thing. I get his downloads. I never read it. You know what? I'm going to download it. I'm going to print it out and I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to go through it. I'm just going to start figuring out like, what are some tax strategies I can use to offset my taxes? That's one action step, right? And it could be very simple, right? So, but the key is can we tether our behavior that it has purpose and meaning because it's moving us in the direction of a calling, of something deeper that wants to emerge. And when we do this dimensionally in every area, what's so cool, and I've watched this happen, when you have 5 areas and we've really mapped out and dropped into and clarified what the calling is in each, and then we start mapping out what are the behaviors that move you in that direction, your life starts to become super dialed in because all your behaviors are moving you in an intentional direction to something that most deeply wants to emerge. And that to me is what unlocks energy. It's what like Like
Mm.
there's more energy in that than all the organic food and supplements and NAD and plunge. And you can imagine when people start to move in the direction of a calling, there's an unlocking, right? And there's also, when you move in the direction of a calling, you start to uncover the objections, the parts that object, the blocks, right? So another kind of skill set is, how do you work with inner resistance? How do you work with inner unseen obstacles and developing the skills of transforming obstacles? And there's a great book by Lama Tsultrim. She's my wife's Buddhist teacher, called Feeding Your Demon. It's a tantric Buddhist practice. It's an ancient practice that it's wild, but it's a practice for transforming inner demons. And demon could be anything. It could be addiction. It could be obsession. It could be compulsion. Anything that starts to block you from achieving or moving toward the thing that you most deeply want. And there's the thing about what I love is every protocol works. Cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, as long as you do it, like find something and do it, work with a coach, work with a therapist, have someone help you navigate a specific obstacle. And if you're not clear of what you want, then work with someone to help you clarify and really tap into what is your calling. Because most people are like, I don't know what I want. Well, it's like, okay, hang on a second. In the dimension of a father, it's a way easier to go, what do I really want as a father? Like, I want to be a present dad. I want to be an impactful father. I want to be someone who doesn't, all these dysfunctions that I've carried. I don't want to transform. I don't want to like pass them on to my kid. Like, so chunk it into a dimension and then feel into a direction, right? So you may not know what you want specifically, but we can get to a place where in community, like, I don't really know what I want, but I don't know, it'd be cool to like have a couple of people that I connect with and talk deeply about meaningful stuff on a regular basis. Like, that would be cool. Great. So move in that direction. Right. And then when you move in that direction, you create a small group that meets every other week. And the focus is around what is your deepest calling? Maybe something will emerge, right? Like, it's all about how do we begin to create movement in the core areas of life, right? In those 5 core areas, just start. And sometimes if I create movement in one area, it starts to move every other area.
Right.
If I'm really blocked in one area, like if I'm in a fight or an argument or static with my wife, everything else kind of breezes up for me. It's the one area where if I don't have a good hygiene, it leaks into everything. If I smell, everywhere I go, I smell. If I have stinky armpits, doesn't matter what I'm doing, I stink. And my relationship dysfunction bleeds into everything else, right? And some people, finances, when things are really statically, like people start to avoid social situations because they feel like they don't have enough, or they start getting, anxious and fearful in business because they don't have enough, or they get really needy. So you can find one and just excel in that. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll identify the one that you feel like you can create the most movement now. And that might be health. It's like, wow, I just started running every day. Great. I'm actually getting more clarity around my business. Endorphins are flowing. Wow. Like I'm showing up not as reactive with my family and my wife and my kids. Great. Like I have more energy during the day to like move through complex things. Great. Right. So let's just find something, create movement, and then let it bleed into every other area. So from a tactical perspective, in the morning, cup of coffee, tea, chai, whatever you want, and just start writing it down. Because when we write it down, I like analog writing down. Some people like to type, but there's something about the encoding process. We all learn to write with pen and paper and pencil and paper when we're kids. It's the earliest form of encoding. It's primal. It's young. Right?
I'd highly recommend people leave their electronics, inside, or if they, ideally, if you can go outside, leave your electronics inside. Just get a pen and paper. That way, there's even just like an energy about that device. Sometimes I even have it on airplane mode because I'm like, oh, if I get an idea, I want to like email myself the idea, but I'll still leave my phone in airplane mode. But even that, I find there's just some,
you have to leave it somewhere else. Yeah.
In my mind, it's like, oh, that phone is still there. Like, there's just some sort of thing. So highly recommend. I love what you said. I think this, And I think one of the basic step, like I love everything you said, because you're like way more kinesthetic than I am. And so now like I have in my mind about like trying to drop into my body more, not trying to drop into my body more. And because I'm processing a lot, I'm a lot more visual, and I'm processing things more, I think, in my head. But either way, the morning quiet time has been extremely, extremely helpful. And I think so many people just don't do that, right? They're picking up their phone, they're running to this, they're checking their email. They think that they have to like be busy, and that working more and doing more stuff and working more is going to like in some way help them. But like, you know, even Keith Cunningham, a great business, you know, mentor, you know, who wrote the book The Road Less Stupid, and talks about like even him and many other millionaires and billionaires, like this quiet time is one of the most important things. Yeah, it's essential. Yeah.
So like if I ask someone a question and they're like, I don't know, right? All lack of understanding is that they haven't yet dropped in and processed it. So if you don't know, then create a space of stillness and sit with it, until you do know. I don't know is not an answer. It just to me means that we haven't stopped, put our attention on it, and dropped into it where we touched it, right? And that's it. So it's like, I don't really know what I want. Well, great. We haven't spent enough time. Let's just sit with this area and let's drop in. And within 6 minutes.
Yeah. So many times it's about like that initial, like, you know, you've even seen this in NLP. People are like, okay, so what do you want in a relationship? And someone will be like, I don't know. And they're like, well, if you did know, what would you say? And they're like, well, I guess I would want this. So it's like, if you actually just stopped and didn't let your automatic system reply with, I don't know. And then you just give up and move to the next thing. Just give yourself some space and time and actually like overcome the, I don't know what you call it, laziness or just defense mechanism system of your body, right?
Yeah. Well, think about like, you know, floating in the ocean with a BC vest, right? When you scuba dive, you have the vest that fills with air and it inflates in it and you float, right? And what happens a lot of times is we float and we get very used to floating on the surface of things. Right? We don't touch things on the deepest level because we got a lot of shit to do. I got a lot of stuff going on all day long. I can't drop into my deepest emotions in the middle of a day when I got stuff going on, right? But every once in a while, you got to pull the vest, let all the air drop and sink. And to go from the surface to the bottom, I don't know if you've ever scuba dive, but you know, it takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get 80 feet. Wow. Right, to really slowly drop, and you don't want to go down too fast, right? Because you're, you know, calibrating pressure and lungs and all that kind of stuff. But you drop slowly. And in entrainment, when we do brainwave entrainment, right? So if you go like a high beta, which is alertness, some anxiety, focus, you know, to-dos, my brain's like buzzing up here vibrationally, like on a beta frequency. When we get into sleep, it's delta. It's very slow waves, right? Like if you go to bed in high beta, you are not sleeping, right? So how do we begin to create fluency and flexibility between brainwave states? And when we do brainwave entrainment, it's usually 6 to 9 minutes to move from a beta to an alpha. Alpha is kind of like more of a creative space. Theta is like meditation. Delta is like sleep, right? So you've got to give yourself, and sometimes I'll put 9 minutes on the clock and I'll sit in stillness and I'll then just start paying attention to sensations in my body, not thoughts and concepts, but actual sensations, right? Pressure, temperature, sensations in the body. There's a great book by Reggie Ray called The Practice of Pure Awareness. And he will walk you through 10 different practices where you go body up in terms of meditation. Most people go top down and they want to blast off into the cosmos. I'm not interested in that. Like I'm interested in coming body up, right? I want to go from the body and dropping into my experience. There's more wisdom in this body than out in the cosmos, right? So how do we drop into the system and into the soma, into the body? And there are many practices. And this goes back to Vajrayana Buddhism. Reggie Ray is a Vajrayana teacher. This is ancient practices. You know, this is not new stuff. This is ancient and deep and powerful, right? So he walks you through some body awareness practice, some like lower belly breath. And you just put the timer on for 9 minutes and you focus on that breath in the lower belly. And boom, you start to access these states of being that are more connected, right? We start connecting. This is what happened with people on my table, is they'd come in stuck in a loop, like in a thought loop of this or that, this or that, this or that, this or that, and spiraling, and stuck, frozen, right? And then they get on the table and they would drop in, they go, oh, I know exactly what I need to do. I know what I want, right? And it's because all they did was they just got out of their head, they dropped into their body, and the wisdom is in the body. There's wisdom in there. There's wisdom in the heart. There's wisdom in the gut, right? And they were able to integrate. Oh, yeah, wow, man. Like now that I'm in myself, like I know what I need to do, you know? And it's just that, how do we create that every day? How do we get to a place where I can tap the wisdom in the body? Because inside my head, that left brain, disembodied cognition, the answers a lot of times aren't in there, right?
Yeah.
I need the left brain, but I also need all the other parts of my antenna, all the other parts of my wisdom that live in the body, my heart and my gut. I need the deep wisdom that's in my unconscious so that I can make a decision. I need to be able to tap into like how I feel so that I can make a decision, because my head can't figure out this or that, right?
Yeah.
So going back to your question, what can people do, right? You can have those 5 dimensions, really drop into each one, start to feel in what wants to emerge, and then start to craft little behaviors that move you in that direction. Nice. One of the skills to metabolize your experience is starting a practice where you can slow down and drop in. And you can start out with, like, if your head's too busy, go for a hike. You know, spend 30, 40, 50 minutes out in nature as a way to begin to drop into your body, and then do a stillness practice and bring an intention into the stillness. Wow, I really want clarity around this relationship struggle, and get out of your head and just listen and drop in. You know, what do I most want to experience in this area of my life? I really want to feel vulnerable and open, right? Great. Like, drop into that, metabolize that, start to feel into what is getting in the way of you achieving that, right? It's very simple, right? And when we think about extraordinary, everybody has their own definition of extraordinary. My definition is not your definition. So really start to define, what would an extraordinary life for you look like? And a lot of people think that other people's extraordinary should be theirs, and it's not. Like I work with some people who have, you know, millions of followers on their Instagram. Like, that's extraordinary to them. To me, that's exhausting. Right.
Right.
That is not extraordinary. I don't want that in my life. That to me is not something to aspire toward. But to them, that was extraordinary and fantastic. That's their extraordinary, you know? So defining your own extraordinary.
Love that.
Right.
Love that, man. John, this has been amazing, man. This has been,
we kind of got some momentum lately as we you get me fired up. I had 2 cups of coffee and I haven't eaten today. So intermittent fasting, stuff, that's a good one too, by the way.
What's that? Which one?
Intermittent fasting, which, you know, you talk about all the time, right? Like,
absolutely.
I do the 16-8, you know, where I don't eat for 16 hours. I got to say, like, you know, I mean, what is it? It's 11:20 Colorado time in Boulder here. So, like, yeah, I'll eat at noon, but I feel my energy is great. Like, eating less, what a way to begin to live an extraordinary life.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely, man. John, this has been amazing. Where can people, I know, you know, I do want to put the caveat out there, you know, John works with really high performers. He's not the cheap coach, if that's what you're looking for. I'll just kind of put that out there. But how can people learn more from you and maybe get in touch with you?
It's a great question. I mean, you know, johno'connor.com is my website. I'll have to go check and see what's up there. I haven't looked in a couple of years. I probably have to update that. But you know, it's interesting. I mean, the book really, so when I think about the calling and so there's another phrase here of, like, what do I want? And then also, what is being asked of me? And that's different. That's where quantum leaps also come in, which is, in my current identity, like, yeah, I'm comfortable. I'm doing what I'm doing. Everything is great. But there's also this other identity that's been, you know, people are like, hey, I want to learn more from you. I can't maybe afford to work with you. And I get that a lot. And so that's been something that has been repetitively been asked. And it's a quantum leap for me to kind of step into, you know, a one-to-many dimension of teaching. And that's really what the book is and I have to step out of my comfort zone to do that. Right. It's not like, I know people are like, yeah, I'm gonna write a book. It's going to be amazing. It's like, man, all right. Like, all right, I got to really move through resistance to do this.
Right.
But I feel a sense of calling, or it's being called of me to kind of start doing more, to putting more stuff out there. And one of my hesitation is that it's a very crowded space. There's a lot of noise in the space, and I don't want to contribute to the noise. And that's why I love working with people like you too. Like, we get to work in your dimension, in your world, in a very meaningful way, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And so, with the book, what I'm trying to do is, how do I begin to transmit stuff it's very clean. There's a signal and there's noise. And I want to kind of eliminate noise, really give people signal they can work to create transformation. And so, I mean, this book really is something that hopefully by the end of the year it's out. And I know you and I've been talking about, like, maybe getting me to launch a podcast of some sort, right? Which I think, just so my website's an easy way to kind of see what I'm doing. And I'm on Instagram. Maybe you can, Mr. John O'Connor, I think is my handle. I should start building a little bit more of an Instagram presence. It is a really beautiful medium. What I'm learning now is I have to reframe my relationship to it. It is a beautiful doorway and portal to relationship. And it could be someone across the world scrolling through, and then boom, there's a doorway in, to connection and contact and transformation. So, like, I'm in the process of updating my paradigm and relationship to, like, the medium. And finding a way to do it in a way that feels very authentic, real, and just integrative in my life. And I'm working on that. I have a lot of friends who are very successful in that space, but I'm slow. I've always been slow with that. But when I make the change, it's solid, right? That's kind of like slow to change. But when I do, there's the other thing too, is people are very trying to find change in a very fast way. The problem with changing fast is that it also can change fast in another direction. So it's okay to change slow, but to have it sticky and stable. I want a stable change so that when I do make a change, I don't have to work so hard to keep the change. I make the change and it's embodied and it's there and it's stable. And so when I work to create stable, long lasting change, not rapid, fast change. You get a lot of bipolar stuff happening with lots of fast. Oh my God, I made this breakthrough. Great. You get that in the ayahuasca world, right? Where, and then it's like, let me look at a couple of weeks and then we'll talk and see where you're at. And it's usually counter to that peak, right?
Right.
So creating slow, stable change is really, to me, is always the goal. I want change that's long lasting. And if it takes me 2 years, great. I don't need a 2-week transformation. I want something that's stable. So
absolutely.
Website's one way. The book will be coming out hopefully by the end of the year.
We'll link to it as soon as it comes out. We'll link to it in the show notes totally. As well.
Great. Yeah. And this is like, I think I haven't done a podcast in, I don't know, 3 years or something like that. Like, I don't do any of these. I at all. So
I'm glad you joined us, man. This was really awesome. Just want to thank you again for everything personally and for sharing your wisdom on the podcast here today. I think people are going to really, really get a lot of value from this. Hopefully start to think about things differently, take some different actions, look inside a little more, feel into their body a little more. So John, thanks so much for coming on. And
thanks for having me, man. I enjoy this. It's nice to feel the joy in the doing versus the assumption of what it's going to be, right? And this is a big disconnect that happens too. It's like people assume what it's going to be, and then you do it, it's very different, right?
Right.
And kind of connecting in the being in the state that emerges in the doing, right? Awesome. People ask me to do podcasts all the time and I don't do them, but yours, I love yours. Yours is great. You put great content out there. People are lucky to have you. And so it was a pleasure to have this conversation. So we should do it again.
Thank you, man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll do it again when the book comes out. All right, man. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
Take care. Thanks for listening. And just a reminder, if you haven't yet tried any of our Peak Performance products, you get 20% off your first order. We have one of the largest selection of USDA certified organic superfood powders, as well as very high quality supplements. And you get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's www.buypeakperformance.com.